Welcome to Public Speaking with Peter George. Do you want to be calm, confident, and credible every time you speak in public? Then stay tuned as Peter and his guests discuss public speaking tips, techniques, and tactics that help you increase your impact, influence, and income. Here's your host, Peter George.
Can podcasting help you grow your speaking business? Yes, it definitely can. Through podcasting, I've gained new clients as a speaker and a speaking coach, and that's fantastic. But the best part of being a host and a guest are the people I've gotten to know. Some of these people are even in my new book, The Captivating Public Speaker, and others have become valuable resources, if not friends. One of these people is Alex Sanfilippo, the founder of PodMatch and other services designed to help podcasters in a multitude of ways. In this episode, Alex tells you how PodMatch came about and how you can use it to build a show, be a frequent guest on shows, and the value of doing either or both. He and PodMatch have been instrumental in the success of this show, and it's a pleasure to have him join me for my 100th episode. Here's my chat with Alex Sanfilippo. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the 100th episode of Public Speaking with Peter George.
Peter, it's an honor to be here. I'm so excited to be part of your 100th episode. That really is a huge milestone. So congrats to you. The amount of shows that get there is few and far between. And to be the guest on a episode like number 100 is truly an honor. So thanks for having me, Peter. Appreciate it.
Glad to have you here. Alex, I've had a few episodes recently that focus on podcasting because I believe the more you speak, the more you'll speak, and that podcasting is a fantastic outlet for speakers. Do you agree with that?
Yes, 100%. And I'll quickly share why. I used to speak on maybe one or two stages a year, and I still do about that. But like when I was just doing once or twice a year, that's the only speaking experience I got. So every time I get back on a stage, just 6 months apart from each other usually, right? I was rusty. I just didn't have the right flow. And then I started podcast and started guesting on podcasts. And then I jump on a stage, again, once every 6 months usually. And people be like, man, you are a super dynamic speaker. So like, do you go on stage all the time? I'm like, no, not really. Like different kind of stage, I suppose. But like it really elevated my game as a speaker. It's all about those reps, right? Like getting it in as much as you can.
It is. And it's funny that you said a different kind of stage, but it is. It's still a stage.
Yeah.
And you're speaking and you're getting that exposure and you're getting the reps and you're getting everything that you need from your side, as well as connecting with people who might not otherwise have heard you or know who you are.
Yeah. And, especially in these last few years and into the future, now that like so many things have gone virtual at this point, it's just a great way for you to be able to keep those reps up. And I mean, I know this show's all about public speaking, right? It's literally the name of it. This is another form of public speaking, just a different one.
Let's talk about your journey in regards of podcasting. I'm sure you didn't go to school to create a podcasting business. What's your background?
Yeah, so my background was actually in aerospace. And I should really mention this up front because people now automatically get this picture of an astronaut, a skydiver, a fighter pilot. Like that's what jumps to people's heads. I was none of those things. I worked behind a computer running a commercial operations division of a parts manufacturer that focused on below the atmosphere. So I just bored everyone to death, but it was a fun job for me. I focused on profit margins and processes to make the company more efficient. Two things I was really passionate about and loved. And I did that for about 15 years before jumping into entrepreneurship. But that was my background, just growing up in big corporate business.
And that is a long way from podcasting.
Very. Yes, nothing translated. Let's put it that way. Those 15 years of skills, they didn't circle over very well. Let's put it that way.
So how'd you segue into podcasting?
I'd say it was about year 12 in that company. We went public and we're part of a multi-billion dollar organization, and things changed. I used to be able to do what now is called being an intrapreneur, which basically means an entrepreneur, but in a business, because I had ideas and I had 5 departments that reported to me. So I was able to like throw an idea out there really fast. And 2 weeks later, it was fully implemented. If it didn't work, it didn't work. We tried something else. All right. It was fun. And then we hit this big public era of the company where now when I had an idea, there was a CEO who took it to a board, who took it to shareholders, who circled back, and the whole process about 6 months. So I went from like overnight having an idea and trying it to 6 months later, let's put a pencil on that and try it again later. I will say this, my last day at the company, my last year there was my best year. I left on really good terms. I believe how you end one season is how you begin the next. But I knew at that year 12 that it was time for me to start moving on. here's the thing, Peter, like I didn't actually know anything about business outside of big corporate. Like if I didn't have 30 employees under me, I didn't really know what to do. And so I started a podcast strictly to learn about people who had left a 9-to-5 job, like a corporate job, to become an entrepreneur. So what I did is just interview people who did that. And I was really just a curious guy who was saying, I want this to be my story one day as well.
It is a world of difference, isn't it? It doesn't translate. It certainly doesn't scale well.
Right, exactly.
I worked for a large company where I had a large budget. And then when I started my own company, I'd come up with these grand ideas. And my wife, who's an accountant, would look at me and say, and what bank are you going to rob? Because it doesn't scale. It's a different world.
It really is. Yep. And I had to learn that same thing of like, oh, well, this is $100,000 idea. I don't have $100,000 right now to spend on this idea. We bootstrapped. So we started with $5,000 and that's what we had to work with.
And it's been growing ever since, right? So you went from that podcast. How did you get into PodMatch? How did you even conceive PodMatch?
Yeah. So just I know you've talked on the show before, and I really appreciate that. PodMatch is a service that automatically connects guests and hosts together for interviews. So people who want to be on shows, people who are looking for guests for shows. And I thought back to when I started my show. Thankfully, my show did really well. But initially, again, being a corporate guy, and I was interviewing entrepreneurs, I didn't know entrepreneurs. I knew 3 of them to be exact. And I had all 3 of them on the show. And I asked all 3 of them to come back on the show. And at that point, they're like, can I introduce you to my friend? And so some of their friends were like, nah, you don't even have your show's not even really launched yet. It's too new. I'm not going to do it. Anyway, I struggled. And thankfully, like I said, my show did really well. So I kind of broke out of that, maybe prematurely compared to what most people do in podcasting. And so I always had the back of my mind, like, man, that's a problem. Who else is struggling with this, I wonder? And a couple of years later, again, my show did really well. So I started speaking at podcasting events. And on one stage in particular, when I got off, I told my wife, my goal after this is I'm going to talk to as many podcasters as I can and ask them what they're struggling with. And here's the thing, 100 people said the exact same thing or about the same thing. But it was all on this idea of I'm having trouble finding the right guest for my show. And I knew at that moment that, yes, you know what, that's what I struggled with too. And all these people have that same problem. The thing is, again, my show took off really fast. So I was able to kind of break that mold. But some of these people were 50, 100 episodes in, still having the same problem. And so I just decided, I devoted at that point, I'm like, you know what? I've learned to be an entrepreneur through my show, and I'm going to apply what I've learned for the podcasting industry. Like, I'm going to solve a problem for this industry I care so much about. And so I found the problem and created a solution for it. And I know I'm summarizing it pretty like short there, Peter, but that's kind of the whole journey that I went on.
You know, one of the words you used in there was finding the right guests. And I've found PodMatch so essential in that not just finding guests, which is hard enough on its own. Well, let's face it, if you get desperate, suddenly you start taking people who aren't necessarily the right fit. Finding that right fit is key. Now, you have over 22,000 hosts and guests on PodMatch, right?
Yes.
Is that where you thought it would be at this point? Or is that a surprise? Or did you want to be further?
Just full transparency, I had no clue. I expected to maybe help a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000. And I probably sold myself a little bit short, but where it is today, I wouldn't have believed if you told me this 2 years ago. Because when we launched, we launched an early beta, June 15th, 2020. And I didn't have a huge expectation. I was just like, hey, maybe this is something. Let's try it. And so we've just kept the same vision. I run it almost exactly the same as I did then. I haven't changed much. I still just focus on the community of people, and I don't do a lot of other things. So again, like if like a venture capitalist or something's listening, they're gonna be like, oh, this guy's got no clue what he's doing. But you know what? Like I've just grown it the way I know how to. And yeah, every day when I hear that number, even hearing you say it, I'm like, my goodness, that's just crazy to think about. I didn't know that it was going to get there. Still to this day, I'm just kind of in shock. And I'm just doing my best to show up for the people that are trusting us. And that's what I do every single day.
One of the things I like about it is the way you are the face of the company and you're in constant contact with the people who subscribe to your service. And I appreciate it. It just makes it feel that you, as a host or a guest, have a connection to the operation itself.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. You know, that is my vision. So like hearing that literally just made my day. Like that's exactly what I'm going after with this thing. It's just so good to hear. And the way I try to show up on shows, like being here, I like to believe it's the same way that if someone had an individual conversation with me, that is my goal, is to basically show up in my even speaking style as I show up with people who use PodMatch. And just hearing you say that literally just made my day. So I'm good. We could totally end this right now and I'm happy. So
Well, there's a big difference of dealing with a company. We can all deal with a company. It's a difference when you're seeing or conversing or in any way in touch with the head of a company. It's a different feel.
Yeah. I always just say that we're human to human. So like if there's B2B, B2C, right? I say we're H to H. We're human to human. Our goal is like, let's just treat people like people and let's just be people and not hide behind a wall or anything like that. And that's the brand that we've really gone after. And real quick, actually, I learned a lot of this from somebody you had on your show. Actually, you had Tanya and Michael, Brand Face, and they were on your, I even wrote down the date because I wanted to remember it in case this came up, but May 16th episode. And they talked about how to build your business by building your personal brand. Yeah, how to build your business by building your personal brand. I highly recommend anyone who didn't hear that episode back on May 16th, go back and listen to that because like I just kind of followed that framework. Like I learned it from someone you had on your show, right? And like that's what we're doing. And they talked about you're buying a billboard space, right? Your brand's what you put on it. Figuring out what to put there is important. And for us, like I said, it goes back to that human to human. What we put on there is, hey, we're people. Hey, I'm Alex. Like I'm waving right now, right? And you're Peter. And let's just be friends and tell me if I can do anything to help you out any more than we already are. And that's kind of been the focus of us and the brand that we've attempted to build. Again, hearing you say that is great to hear for me. So
case in point was before we started recording, I said, I have one question for you. And you walked me through the answer of how to handle a situation I was experiencing. So, having that exposure is, and that connection is great. What's been your greatest aha moment? And we all have them in business. So along the way with PodMatch, what was that thing going, oh my God, I didn't realize that was going to happen, whatever it might be?
It actually came from a problem. Again, and there might be a trend here for everyone who's listening today, is I identify problems, I try to build a solution around them. But early on, Peter, like your show, public speaking, you've broken past what most people do, as I said at the beginning, like 100 episodes. That's almost unheard of in podcasting, which sounds crazy because you and I probably know other people that have done it. But percentage wise, there's almost no one that does it. I don't even know what the percent is, but it's less than 0.2% or 3% or something like that actually make it that far. Podcasting on that side of the mic is really difficult. And that's why I always tell people that are guests, you had a really great episode on this, by the way. It was one of your quick bites where you talk about being how to be a good guest on a podcast, basically. I encourage everyone, again, go back and listen to that. That's another one. That one's on May 12th. Go listen to that because
you know this better than I do.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, like what you shared, I'm like, man, that validates what the host is doing and helps them keep on going. Anyway, I digress. Going back to your question though, the thing that I realized that was happening is we had hosts leaving as quick as they were joining. And so I told my co-founder, Jesse, who's like the software side, I'm like, dude, I think that something we're doing isn't working. Like hosts are leaving. They must not like it. I'm like, give me their email address because they opted in, right? So legally I have it. And give me their email address. I'm going to email each of them individually and see if they can give me a phone call to find out why. And what I learned was really interesting. There's the 1% that literally is like, well, screw you. Your product's the worst, right? Like, and everybody has those with the bad experience, but I couldn't learn much from that. What I was worried about was the 99% of the people that had a valid reason for leaving. And here's the thing. Every single one of them, few exceptions again, but every single one that I talked to said, oh, I didn't leave PodMatch. I stopped podcasting. I just quit. I'm done. And that really broke my heart because I feel that the way the world's really being served right now is if you can get on a physical stage or virtual stage, great. Not just podcasting, but any sort of like public speaking in any way, again, including podcasting, is really the ultimate way the world's being served. A lot of what we see on TV or you see on any sort of big media is kind of has, and I'm not trying to get like political here, but it has like an agenda, right? It has a flow to it. You can't go on there and just share anything. But if you're on a stage and it's you and somebody hands you a mic, whether it's a podcast or a stage, right? Like you're going to share what you've got. And I love that. So hearing that people were stopping doing this, like really broke my heart. This is like that big aha moment. I was like, why? And there was a couple reasons, but the main reason that we found is because usually it's a spouse. He's like, you're spending $45 a month. It's not a lot, but it adds up. You've been doing this for a year. Is anyone listening? Right? Not many people yet. And if there's one thing we know, consistency wins in podcasting when you're a host and a guest, really. But I just realized, I'm like, what if we give a cut of our profits to podcast hosts? Not a lot, but let's help them break zero on production. And so that's what we started doing. We literally, I don't really usually share this number. We just cut our revenue straight in half and said, we'll keep 50% to run the business and to pay ourselves. The other 50%, we're going to divide up and give back to hosts as they're releasing episodes. So as long as they're still podcasting, we're going to help them out. And it's not a lot. Sometimes it's $2 or $3. Sometimes it's $20, but it's never much more than that. But the thing is, we're finding that the hosts that are breaking even now are staying in podcasting longer. So our churn rate, as it's called in software, has dropped dramatically because we're actually helping people say, you know what? I'm going to keep on doing this podcasting thing because I'm making $20 a month now. I'm not losing money more. I'm going to keep on doing this and pursue that passion even further. That was my biggest aha moment. It's been really good for our system and just further helps us promote what we love, which is people podcasting.
Like you said, it's not a lot of money when you add it up on your end. It's a great deal of money, but
it is. Yeah. Yep.
To the podcast, it's that mindset of, hey, I'm getting something back here. And when you started that, I'm like, oh, that'd be nice to get a few bucks here and there. Every month when I look at it, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it's just a nice way of giving back. And I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of hosts do.
We've gotten really good feedback from it. And again, it just further drove the fact that, hey, we're all human. We acknowledge we're in this together. And like, did it hurt us to do that? I suppose. But at the end of the day, like, this is a purpose-driven business. And we feel like it really just furthers the purpose. So I'm fine with taking a smaller paycheck. I'm thankful that we are taking one. That's a beautiful thing for us to build a business that we can pay us. But ultimately, I just love seeing people do what you've done, which again is such a rare thing, but I hope becomes a little bit less rare. Maybe not in the public speaking space, but like whatever their podcast niche is, right? Like whatever theirs is, I love it.
You've also gone on to create an ecosystem, if you will, with Podcast SOP and Podcasting Made Simple. Can you tell us about those?
Again, like the next smallest problem, going back to like what we found with people like getting paid was a big one. But the next thing is a lot of people aren't really organized with their show production release. And this is actually, if you're saying, oh, I want to be a guest on shows, listen for hosts that say stuff like this. If you do like a pre-call or you get to know them a little bit, that say, oh, I'm so stressed, or, oh, I always forget to do different things. Watch out for that. That's usually a little bit of a red flag that they might be coming up on a stop because they just can't keep up with it. So we built Podcast SOP, which stands for Standard Operating Procedures, strictly to help podcast hosts manage their production. It's a glorified checklist. It's basically project management software that literally just helps a host say, okay, here's my 10 steps I do every time. Check, go through the whole thing. Done. The episode's released. And it's a little bit more than that, but that's kind of the summary of it. And then Podcasting Made Simple is our podcast, which helps both guests and hosts. So it's strictly education. I like to think it's more like a TED Talk that's either directed toward a podcast guest or podcast host, just to help them elevate and take that game to the next level.
If you have any, you don't have to tell us what it is, but do you have any other ideas in the works that will continue to help and feed podcasting?
Sure. Around the time this episode airs, this will probably just be hopefully coming out or a couple weeks away. The next thing, again, looking at those problems, right? Finding the problem, offering the solution. Is hosts have trouble getting reviews for their show. Now, your show, Public Speaking, has good. You have great reviews. You have 5 stars, like you're crushing it. It's good, really good. But most hosts don't have what you have right now. And so they have one review and they have 100 episodes or 80 episodes. And so we basically built a system that we're saying, hey, how can hosts help each other get more reviews? Well, we wanted to be integrity based. So we basically built what's, for lack of a better term, a lottery system. And basically what it does is allows everyone to jump in, all podcast hosts, and it'll give you the option to review each other. When you leave a review, you earn a ticket. And then every night, a number is drawn. If your number is drawn, you win multiple reviews from other hosts. We actually worked with Apple on this specifically. So it actually makes sure that people listen to the episode and then leave the review. So it's all like integrity based, which is really important to us. But I think that podcast hosts know how to leave a good review because they've gotten some of them, right?
Right.
So us leaving each other reviews, maybe finding ways that we can partner up and stuff like that, I think is going to be a really fun thing. We did a small alpha test, 150 people. It went really well. And so we're actually going to release this fully on mobile. Hopefully, like I said, by the time this episode airs or a week or two after, but that's something we're working on that I haven't really talked about. So it's cool to get to mention it. And I need to work on my little pitch for it. But I'll get there. I got time.
You're right. That's a problem. It's built in as far as a guest goes. Review the guest. That's built into your system.
Correct.
But where the reviews are outside, how do you get people to do that? Although I've been a guest on one show where it was handled so well, it surprised me. I reached out to someone. I said, here's why I believe I'd be a good guest for your listeners. And she wrote back and said, I would love to have you on. Here's what I want you to do. Listen to 2 to 3 episodes, which I suggest to every guest anyway.
Yes. And
then she said, and then leave me a review. Once you do that, we'll set a date.
I like that.
And I thought, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's very good.
That is really good. That's great.
I listened to the episodes. I wrote her a review. I was on her show, and actually, I believe it's next week or the week after, she'll be on my show, at least recording then.
That's great.
And we're both public speaking coaches.
Very cool. So you guys have great synergy. So it's going to be like a really beneficial episode for everyone who hears it.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. I love that. It's so good to hear.
Like I said, Alex, you and your company have been a tremendous part of my success in podcasting, both hosting and as a guest. So I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. I appreciate you being here and being on my 100th episode. Where can my listeners go to learn more about the various services you provide to podcast hosts and guests?
Yes, I'll give you a little bonus tip right here as well for your listeners. It's really important to have a singular call to action. Peter, you've talked about that before, that same solo, like that short episode I talked about, like you mentioned that in there. It's really important because right now what a lot of people do, and this is just a little bonus tip for everybody, is hey, go look me on LinkedIn. My book is here. You can book me as a speaker there. That really muddies the water. So now people that are listening are like, well, what do you want me to do? It's like saying, hey, go any of these directions. You want to have somewhere that you send people. So for me, where people can find me is everything I do is at podpros.com, podpros.com. And that will have all of our products, all of our services, all my social media. Anything that we're up to is going to be in that same spot. And that's where I tell people to go.
Hopefully a lot of people will go there, look at the various services. If they can help those people, I hope they sign up for it. I can vouch for it. And Alex, once again, thanks for being here on this episode, the 100th. I really appreciate it. And I wish you, your wife, and your crew a ton of success.
Thanks so much, Peter. Truly an honor to be here. Congratulations again, 100 episodes. That's just an incredible thing that you've done here. And I'm looking forward to the next 100 as a listener myself. I can't wait to hear where you take people. Thanks again.
That's a wrap of another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tune in Monday when you'll hear another episode of Public Speaking with Peter George, and again Thursday for your next episode of Quick Bites, public speaking tips and techniques you can digest in 5 minutes or less. Until next time, remember, when it comes to speaking in public, you've got this.